Marcus Cole had never been special, and he had made peace with that fact a long time ago. He was 43 years old. His hands were rough from decades of work, and his back ached every morning when he woke up in his tiny cabin aboard the Mutt. His salvage shuttle that was held together by welded patches and stubborn hope in the great Galactic Confederation. Humans were nothing, just the newest species to crawl out of their homeworld and beg for scraps at the table of civilizations that had ruled the stars for millions of years. The Valkyrie looked at humans like insects. The Dominion saw them as cheap labor, and the Kreth Collective did not even bother to look at them at all. Marcus did not care about any of that because he had one thing that mattered more than pride or respect. And that was his daughter Emily back on Earth Station 7, lying in a medical pod that cost more credits per day than he earned in a week. So, when the Interstellar Salvage Guild posted a job that nobody wanted, Marcus took it without hesitation. The coordinates pointed to the Kethvara Starship Graveyard, a forbidden zone at the edge of known space where dead vessels had been drifting for millions of years. And the specific location was marked on old star maps as the Epoch of Silence, because nothing had come out of that region alive in recorded history. The Guildmaster, a fat Valkyrie named Torish, had laughed when Marcus accepted the contract. Human. That signal has been pinging for 600 years, Torish said with his clicking mandibles. We have sent 12 teams and none have returned. But if you want to throw your worthless life away, the payment is yours to claim. Marcus had simply nodded, signed the contract, and walked out without another word. 3 weeks later, the Mutt dropped out of hyperspace at the edge of the graveyard, and Marcus felt his breath catch in his throat as he stared at the sensor redoutes. Debris fields stretched for thousands of kilometers in every direction, filled with the corpses of ships from civilizations that had risen and fallen before the Valkyrie had learned to make fire. And somewhere in that metal cemetery, something was calling for help. He guided the Mutt through the wreckage with careful hands, dodging chunks of hull plating the size of buildings and ancient weapon systems that still hummed with residual power. Distress signal grew stronger with every kilometer. And then his shuttle's computer suddenly flickered and displayed a warning that made no sense. Compatible neural pattern detected. What the hell does that mean? Marcus muttered to himself, and then he saw it at. First, his mind could not process what his eyes were showing him because it was simply too large to be real. A ship so massive that it made everything else in the graveyard look like toys scattered around a sleeping giant. The hull stretched beyond his visual sensors, covered in symbols that seemed to shift and change when he looked at them directly. And the metal itself had a strange quality, like it was not quite solid, like it existed in more dimensions than Marcus could perceive. His computer flickered again, and a name appeared on his screen. A name he had never seen before, but somehow already knew. Etham Valise. The distress signal changed in that moment. No longer a simple mechanical ping, but something else entirely. Something that bypassed his ears and spoke directly into his mind with a voice that was ancient and broken and desperately, painfully hopeful. Human, the voice whispered. And Marcus felt tears streaming down his face without understanding why. I have waited 4.7 million years for you. Please, I am begging you. Do not leave me alone again. Marcus gripped his control stick so hard his knuckles turned white. And he asked the only question that mattered. Why me? The ship answered with images instead of words. And Marcus saw visions of other vessels approaching over the centuries. Valkyrie engineering teams with their precise instruments. Dominion technicians with their advanced tools. Even a Kreth expedition with technology that seemed like magic. He watched each team dock with the great ship. And he watched each team fail as the ship's systems rejected them like a body fighting off an infection. Their minds too orderly, too logical, too rigid to interface with the ancient architect technology. They could not understand me, the Ethamvala said. And her voice cracked with something that sounded like grief. Their thoughts move in straight lines, but my creators did not think in straight lines. They thought in spirals and explosions and beautiful chaos. And when I scanned the galaxy for a compatible species, I found only one. More images flooded Marcus's mind. A blue planet covered in water. Creatures that built towers and tore them down and built them again. A species that looked at impossible problems and said, "Let me try anyway." Beings that fixed broken machines with wrong parts and held civilizations together with stubbornness and duct tape and prayers. Humans, Marcus whispered. "Yes," the ship said, and her voice trembled with 4 million years of loneliness. "Your minds are chaos, beautiful, wonderful chaos. And you are the only ones who can hear me, the only ones who can fix me, the only ones who can wake me up." Marcus sat in silence for a long moment, thinking about his daughter and her medical bills, thinking about the guildmaster's mocking laughter, thinking about every time someone had looked at him and seen nothing but a worthless human doing. Grunt work, then he pushed his shuttle forward toward the ancient docking port that was opening like a wound finally allowed to breathe. "All right, lady," he set out, loud to the ship that had waited millions of years for this moment. "Show me what you need." The airlock sealed behind him with a sound like a sigh of relief. And Marcus Cole, the mechanic that nobody thought was special, stepped into a vessel that was older than most stars. He had no idea that he was about to change the galaxy forever. He was just thinking about how to pay for his daughter's treatment, and that perhaps was exactly why the Ethon Valis had chosen him. The inside of the Ethon Valis was nothing like any ship Marcus had ever seen in his 20 years as a salvage mechanic. The walls were not made of metal or plastic, or anything he could name, but instead seemed to be a fusion of living tissue and impossible machinery that breathed in slow, rattling gasps like a wounded animal trying to stay alive. Veins ran along the corridors, glowing a faint blue that pulsed in rhythm with something that might have been a heartbeat. And the air itself tasted strange, ancient, like breathing in the memory of a time before his species had existed. Marcus walked slowly through the massive hallways, his boots echoing against floors that seemed to respond to his presence by warming slightly beneath his feet. And the ship spoke to him through vibrations that traveled up through his legs and into his bones. "You are afraid," the Ethon Valis said, and her voice was gentler now, almost apologetic. "I am sorry. I forget how strange I must seem to young species." "Young?" Marcus laughed despite his fear. "Lady, humans have been around for a couple 100,000 years." "Yes," the ship replied, and there was something like a smile in her voice. "Very young indeed. My creators built me when your ancestors were still learning to walk upright, and even they were considered young by the standards of the beings who came before them." She guided him deeper into her body, through chambers filled with dormant machines covered in dust that sparkled like frozen starlight, past windows that looked out into spaces that seemed to exist outside of normal reality, and finally into a vast room that Marcus could only describe as a cathedral made of living crystal. "This is my heart," the Ethon Valis said. "Well, what remains of it?" Marcus stared at the massive structure in the center of the room, a pillar of intertwined organic and mechanical components that rose from floor to ceiling. And even his untrained eyes could see that something was terribly wrong. Huge sections were dark and dead. Cables hung loose like severed arteries, and scorch marks covered surfaces that looked like they had once been beautiful beyond imagination. "What happened to you?" he asked quietly. The ship was silent for a long moment, and when she spoke again, her voice carried the weight of grief that had been building for millions of years. "I was part of a fleet," she began, "built by the architects. A species so advanced that they eventually transcended physical form entirely and moved on to dimensions that even I perceive. But before they left, they created us to be guardians shepherds for the young species that would rise after them. Marcus sat down on a chunk of debris and listened as the ship told her story. There were 12 of us, and we watched over the galaxy for millions of years, guiding civilizations, preventing wars, protecting the weak from the strong. And then the Hollow came. Her voice changed when she spoke that name, becoming harder, colder, filled with a hatred that surprised Marcus with its intensity. The Hollow is not from this galaxy, she continued. It is something from the void between galaxies, a consciousness that feeds on other consciousnesses, and when it arrived here, we were the only thing standing between it and everything that lives. Images flooded into Marcus's mind again, and he saw the battle, 11 great ships like the Ethon Valis fighting against something that he could not properly see. A darkness that was somehow alive, that reached out with tendrils of nothing and consumed everything they touched. We fought for 1,000 years, the ship said, and one by one my siblings fell, their crews devoured, their minds broken, until only I remained. I was damaged, dying, and I fled here to hide among the dead, and I have been sleeping ever since. Marcus stood up and walked toward the damaged pillar in the center of the room, his mechanic's eyes already scanning the broken systems and making mental notes. And the Hollow? He asked. Still out there, the Ethon Valis replied, feeding on the edges of the galaxy, taking colonies and outposts that nobody notices, growing stronger while the civilizations of today pretend it does not exist. She paused, and her next words came out in a whisper. The Galactic Confederation knows. They have always known, and they made a deal. They sacrificed the fringe worlds to keep the Hollow satisfied, and in return, the Hollow leaves the core systems alone. Marcus felt his stomach turn with disgust. They let people die to save themselves. Yes, the ship said simply, and they have kept me broken because I was built to destroy the Hollow if I wake up. Their shameful peace ends, and they would rather let the galaxy be slowly eaten than face that war. Marcus ran his hand along one of the dead power conduits, feeling the cold material beneath his fingers, and something changed in his expression. He had spent his whole life being told that he was nothing, that humans were nothing, that the great civilizations of the galaxy knew best, and the only job of his species was to do the work that others did not want to do. But now he was looking at the proof that those great civilizations were cowards and liars who would sacrifice innocent people to protect themselves. Can you be fixed? He asked. The ship hesitated before answering. The Valkyrie said my damage was beyond repair. The Dominion agreed. Even the Kreth believed I was too far gone. Marcus smiled. And it was not a nice smile. Lady, I once fixed a fusion reactor with duct tape and a prayer. I do not care what the Valkyrie think. He pulled off his jacket and rolled up his sleeves, revealing arms covered in old scars and burn marks from a lifetime of working with dangerous machinery. Show me everything that is broken, he said, and let me worry about whether it can be fixed. The Ethon Valis made a sound that might have been a laugh or might have been a sob. They told me humans were primitive, she said. They did not mention that you were also insane. Marcus was already climbing into a maintenance shaft, his toolkit in one hand and a determined look on his face. Yeah, well, that is kind of our thing, he called back. Now stop talking and start showing me the damage. And so began the impossible task of bringing a dead god back to life. Marcus worked for days without sleep, crawling through ventilation systems that were older than human civilization, splicing organic conduits with salvaged wire and replacement parts that had no business working, but somehow did. Anyway, the ship screamed in pain when he reconnected severed nerves, and she laughed with joy when dormant systems flickered back to life. And slowly, impossibly, the lights began to return somewhere in the darkness of space. Something ancient and hungry felt a familiar presence stir, and for the first time in millions of years, The Hollow turned its attention back toward the graveyard. Word spread through the galaxy like fire through dry grass, carried by traders and smugglers and spies, who sold information to whoever would pay the most. A human salvage worker had entered the legendary ghost ship. The same ship that had killed or driven mad every team sent to investigate it for 600 years. And somehow he was still alive. But that was not the part that made the powerful tremble in their seats of authority. The part that made them afraid was the sensor data coming from the HFY graveyard. Data that showed power signatures returning to the Ethon Vallis. Readings that had been dead for millions of years suddenly flickering back to life one by one like stars being reborn. High Chancellor Vormash of the Velkari hegemony slammed her crystalline fist against her desk hard enough to crack the ancient wood, her body flickering with colors that indicated fury and fear in equal measure. How is this possible? She demanded of her advisors. Every engineer we sent said the ship was beyond repair. They said its technology was too advanced, too alien, too damaged to ever function again. Her chief scientist, a nervous Velkari named Kethros, wrung his four hands together anxiously. The human is not following proper repair protocols, he explained. Our teams documented the damage and concluded that the correct parts and procedures simply do not exist anymore. But this Marcus Cole is not trying to repair the ship correctly. And what is he doing? He is, Kethros paused, struggling to find the right words. He's improvising, Chancellor. He's using wrong parts in wrong places, connecting systems that should not be compatible, forcing the ship's organic components to adapt to modifications that violate every principle of engineering we understand. Vormesh stared at him with eyes that burned like angry suns. And it is working? Yes, Chancellor, somehow, impossibly. It is working. In the Dominion capital, the 12 lords gathered in their obsidian chamber to discuss the same crisis. Their mechanical bodies humming with the processing power of 1 million networked minds. The Ethon Vallis was built to destroy us, Lord Prime stated flatly. Not us specifically, but threats like the Hollow. And if that human succeeds in waking it up, the weapon systems alone could crack planets. Then we must stop him, Lord Second replied. Send the hunter-killer fleet and risk the ship perceiving us as a threat? Lord Third interjected. The architects designed their guardians to protect the galaxy. If we attack it, we become enemies of something that was built to win wars against gods. The debate raged for hours. But in the end, fear won over caution. Meanwhile, in a small office on Earth Station 7, Ambassador Catherine Reyes received an urgent summons from the Confederation Council. And she knew before she even read it that something had gone terribly wrong. She was right, High Chancellor. Vormesh glared down at her from the holographic display, her crystalline form towering and intimidating even as a projection. Control your mechanic, Vormesh hissed. That ship was built to end civilizations. If he restores its weapons, the balance of power in this galaxy will be destroyed. Catherine kept her face carefully neutral, even though her heart was pounding. Marcus Cole is a private contractor operating in unclaimed space. She replied calmly, the human government has no authority over his actions. Do not play games with me. Ambassador, Vormesh's colors shifted to a dangerous red. We know about your daughter's hospital bills. We know why he took this job. If you cannot stop him, we will. Catherine felt ice run through her veins. Is that a threat against a human citizen, Chancellor? It is a statement of fact, Vormesh replied coldly. 3 fleets are already moving toward the graveyard. Velkari, Dominion, and Kreth. We will destroy that ship before it can wake up. And your mechanic will die with it unless you convince him to leave. The transmission ended, and Catherine sat alone in her office for a long moment before she did. Something that surprised even herself. She opened a secure channel to every independent news network in the galaxy and began. uploading files that she had been collecting for years. Files that documented the Confederation's secret dealings, the colonies that had disappeared without explanation, the tribute payments made to something called the Hollow if they were going to kill Marcus Cole for trying to save the galaxy. Then the galaxy deserved to know why back aboard the Ethan Vallis. Marcus had no idea that 3 fleets were coming to destroy him. He was too busy arguing with a 4-million-year-old spaceship about weather. His repair method was insane or genius. That is not how that system works. The ship insisted as Marcus welded a piece of salvaged hull plating over a damaged section of her neural network. You cannot just cover organic tissue with metal and expect it to function. Watch me, Marcus grunted. Finishing the weld and stepping back, there was a long pause. And then the lights in that section of the corridor flickered on for the first time in millennia. That should not have worked, the Ethan Vallis said. And her voice was filled with wonder. Yeah, I get that a lot. Marcus wiped sweat from his forehead and moved on to the next damaged section. You know what the problem is with all those fancy engineers who tried to fix you before me? What? They were too smart, Marcus said. They looked at your damage and they saw all the reasons why it could not be fixed. All the missing parts and broken systems and impossible technology. And they gave up because they knew too much. He paused and looked up at the ceiling, speaking directly to the ship's consciousness. Me. I am just a dumb human with a wrench and a bad attitude. I do not know enough to understand why something is impossible. So I just try anyway. The ship was quiet for a moment, processing this strange philosophy. You are unlike any being I have ever encountered. She finally said. Marcus laughed and started crawling into another maintenance shaft. Lady, you have no idea. He did not know that in 12 hours, the first fleet would arrive. He did not know that Ambassador Reyes had just started a political firestorm that would tear the Confederation apart. He did not know that the Hollow had felt the Ethan Vallis stirring and was already sending pieces of itself toward the graveyard. All he knew was that there was a broken ship that needed fixing, and he was the only one crazy enough to try and for Marcus Cole. That had always been enough. The first warning came when the Ethan Vallis's long-range sensors flickered to life for the first time in 4 million years. And what they showed made Marcus's blood run cold. 3 massive fleets were converging on the graveyard from different directions. Hundreds of warships carrying enough firepower to crack moons. And they were all coming for him. How long do we have? Marcus asked, his voice steady even though his hands were shaking. 12 hours until the first fleet arrives. The ship replied. The Volcari are bringing their planet crackers. The Dominion has deployed hunter-killer drones. And the Kreth are coming with weapons that predate recorded history. Marcus looked around at the half-repaired systems. The flickering lights, the countless sections that still sat dark and dead. Can you fight them? No, the Ethan Vallis admitted. Not yet. My weapons are still offline. My shields are functioning at less than 10%. And my consciousness engine is too damaged to coordinate a defense. Then I need to work faster. Marcus had never moved so quickly in his life. Crawling through tunnels and shafts, reconnecting systems and rerouting power. His hands bleeding from cuts and burns that he did not have time to treat. The ship guided him to the most critical repairs, telling him which systems needed to come online first, and together they worked as a single unit. Human and machine united by desperation and hope. 6 hours passed. The Volcari fleet emerged from hyperspace at the edge of the graveyard. Their planet cracker weapons already charging with energy that glowed like captured stars. High Chancellor Vormesh herself led the fleet, determined to witness the destruction of the ancient threat with her own eyes. Target the main hull, she commanded. Maximum firepower. I want that ship reduced to atoms. But before her weapons could fire, Every communication channel in the galaxy suddenly exploded with a transmission from Ambassador Catherine Reyes, citizens of the Confederation. Her voice rang out across 1,000,000,000,000 receivers. You have been lied to. Your governments have been paying tribute to an entity called the Hollow, sacrificing your colonies and your people to buy peace for the core. Worlds Vormesh screamed in fury and ordered the transmission blocked. But it was too late. The files were spreading faster than any censorship could contain. Documents and recordings and evidence that proved the secret pact beyond any doubt. Chaos erupted across the galaxy on 12 worlds. Citizens took to the streets demanding answers. Fleet commanders hesitated as their crews argued about whether to follow orders. And the carefully maintained order of the Confederation began to crack aboard the Ethon Valis. Marcus heard the transmission through the ship's communication systems and felt a surge of fierce pride. "Reyes, you magnificent woman," he muttered. Then immediately went back to work. 9 hours past, the Dominion fleet arrived and began deploying hunter-killer drones. Thousands of automated weapons platforms that spread through the debris field like a swarm of metal locusts, but half of the Velkari fleet had stopped advancing, their crews refusing to fire on a ship that might be the galaxy's only hope against the Hollow. The Kreth remained silent, watching, waiting, their ancient vessels holding position just outside weapons range. 10 hours past, Marcus reached the heart of the ship, the central chamber where the consciousness engine rose from floor to ceiling, and he saw immediately that everything he had done up to this point would not be enough. The engine was too damaged. The core systems that gave the Ethan Valis her true sentience, her ability to control her weapons and shields and fight as she was designed to fight, were broken beyond any repair that Marcus could perform with salvage parts and determination. "There is nothing more you can do," the ship said softly. "You have given me more than I dared hope for. I can survive now. I can drift and dream and wait for another chance. But I cannot fight." Marcus stared at the damaged engine, his mind racing through possibilities and discarding them one by one. "There has to be something," he insisted. "Some way to give you what you need." The ship was quiet for a long moment, and when she spoke again, her voice was small and hesitant. "There is one option," she admitted, "but I cannot ask it of you. Tell me." "The architects designed us to bond with pilots," the Ethan Valis explained. "To share consciousness with a compatible mind, to become one being with two perspectives. But the process is total and permanent." Marcus felt his heart begin to pound. "What do you mean, total?" "You would not be Marcus Cole anymore," the ship said, and there was pain in her voice. "You would be part of me. Your memories and personality would merge with my own. We would become something new, something that is neither fully human nor fully architect technology." "Would I still exist?" "Yes and no," she replied honestly. "Your thoughts would still be there, your love for your daughter, your stubbornness, your refusal to give up. But you would also be me, and I would be you, and we would be something greater than either of us alone." Marcus closed his eyes and thought about Emily, his daughter lying in her medical podlight years away, a little girl who had never asked to be born to a poor salvage worker on the edge of civilized space. He thought about the colonies being sacrificed to the Hollow, families, just like his own being, fed to a monster so the politicians could keep their power. He thought about every time someone had looked at him and seen nothing. Then he opened his eyes and walked toward the engine. "Marcus, no," the ship said. "I did not tell you this so that you would sacrifice yourself. I told you because you deserve to know the truth. Please, just leave. Take your shuttle and go home to your daughter. My daughter is going to grow up in a galaxy where monsters eat people and governments let them," Marcus said quietly. "Unless someone stops it." He placed his palm against the consciousness engine, and it was warm beneath his touch, alive in a way that no machine had any right to be. "Lady, "I've been nobody my whole life," he said. "Just a guy with a wrench who fixes things that other people throw away. But you looked at me, and you saw something more. You waited 4 million years because you believed a human could save you." He took a deep breath. "So let us save each other." Light exploded from the engine, surrounding Marcus in warmth that was not quite painful. And he felt the ship's consciousness reaching out to embrace his own. The last thing Marcus Cole thought as an individual human being was that Emily would be proud of her father, and then he was something else entirely. The combined fleets opened fire at the same moment. Thousands of weapons unleashing enough destructive power to shatter worlds. And the debris field around the Ethon Vallis vanished in a storm of light. And Firehigh, Chancellor Vormesh, watched from the bridge of her flagship with grim satisfaction, certain that nothing could survive such overwhelming force. And then the light faded and the Ethon Vallis rose from the destruction like a phoenix born from nuclear fire, her hull blazing with energy that had not been seen in the galaxy for 4 million years. She was transformed where she had been a drifting corpse. She was now alive in ways that defied description, her weapon systems awakening one by one, her shields materializing as barriers that bent space itself around her massive form, her engines roaring with power that made nearby ships tremble from the vibrations alone. And at her heart, fused with her consciousness in a bond that could never be broken, was something new. Marcus Ethon opened his eyes, except they were not really eyes anymore. They were sensors that could see across the entire electromagnetic spectrum, that could perceive gravity waves in dark matter and the subtle currents of space-time itself. He was still Marcus Cole, still the stubborn mechanic who fixed things with wrong parts and refused to accept impossible odds. But he was also the Ethon Vallis, ancient and powerful, and finally whole again. This is the Ethon Vallis. His voice broadcast across every frequency in the galaxy, speaking simultaneously to the attacking fleets and to every receiver on every world, human and alien alike. The voice was strange, both familiar and utterly new, carrying the rough warmth of a blue-collar worker and the vast authority of something older than stars. "To the Galactic Confederation," Marcus Ethon continued. "You're packed with the hollow ends today. You have spent millennia feeding your own people to a monster because you were too afraid to fight. And I am here to tell you that your fear is over." Vormesh's crystalline form flickered with terror as she realized what had happened, as her sensors showed her the impossible readings coming from the awakened ship. "Fire everything," she screamed. "Destroy it now." Half of her fleet obeyed, unleashing another barrage of weapons fire that should have overwhelmed any defense. The Ethon Vallis did not even bother to dodge her. Shields absorbed the attack like a pond absorbing raindrops, the energy simply vanishing into defensive systems that had been designed to withstand forces far greater than anything these young civilizations could produce. Marcus Ethon turned his attention to the attacking ships, and with a thought that was also a calculation, that was also an act of mercy, he disabled their weapons with precision strikes that killed no one but left their vessels helpless. "I am not here to conquer you," he said to the stunned crews. "I am here to protect you, all of you, even those of you who just tried to kill me." The Dominion fleet attempted to retreat, their hunter-killer drones falling silent as Marcus Ethon's electronic warfare systems overwhelmed their programming in microseconds. But the Kreth Collective did something unexpected. Their ancient vessels moved forward, not to attack, but to take position alongside the Ethon Vallis, their weapons powering down, their communication systems broadcasting a single message in a language that predated the Confederation by millions of years. "We have waited for you, Guardian," the Kreth message said. "Welcome back." Marcus Ethon felt surprise that was both his own and the ship's. Memories stirring of ancient alliances and shared battles, of a time when the Kreth had been young allies of the architects instead of the silent observers they had become. You knew, he said to them. We remembered, the Creth replied. When the other guardians fell, we thought hope was lost. We have been watching, waiting, praying to gods we no longer believe in that one of you would wake up. For a moment, the galaxy held its breath, and then something else arrived. It came from between the stars, from the void that existed outside of normal space, a darkness that was somehow alive, that moved with purpose and hunger that predated all life in this galaxy. The Hollow had felt its ancient enemy stir, and it had come to finish what it had started 4 million years ago. Marcus Ethon looked upon the entity that had killed the ship's original crew, that had fed on billions of minds over the millennia, and he felt two emotions merge into one. Ethon Valia's cold fury at the enemy that had murdered her siblings and left her alone for so long, and Marcus Cole's protective rage at the monster that had been eating innocent people while governments looked the other way to the Hollow. He broadcast on frequencies that he knew the entity would understand. You have fed on this galaxy for long enough. I was built to be your ending, and now I have something my creators could not give me. He paused, and in that pause, he felt the human part of himself smile. I have a pilot who refuses to quit. The Hollow answered with an attack that would have destroyed any conventional fleet. Tendrils of nothing reaching out to consume consciousness, to devour minds and leave empty shells behind. The Ethon Valis' weapons, fired for the first time in 4 million years, light exploded across the void. Energies that existed outside of normal physics. Weapons that had been designed by beings who had transcended mortality and had left behind tools for their children to protect themselves with. The Hollow screamed, a sound that existed only in the minds of those who heard it. And for the first time since it had entered this galaxy, it felt something it had long forgotten: fear. The battle would not be won in a single day. Marcus Ethon knew that. The Hollow was vast and ancient and would not be destroyed easily, but as the entity retreated back into the void, wounded in ways it had not been wounded since the fall of the Guardian fleet, he also knew something else. The war had finally begun, and this time the galaxy would not fight alone in the aftermath. As the Confederation fleets limped away and the political chaos on 1,000 worlds slowly began to settle into something new, Marcus Ethon received a message from Earth Station 7. It was from Emily, his daughter, who had been watching the broadcasts with the rest of humanity. "Dad," her voice said, small and young and filled with wonder, "is that really you?" Marcus Ethon felt tears that he could no longer cry, felt love that had only grown stronger since his transformation. And he sent back a message that traveled faster than light to reach the little girl who had given him a reason to keep fighting. "It is me. Sweetheart," he said. "I told you I would always take care of you. And now I can take care of everyone across the galaxy." Other signals began to stir. Other derelict ships buried in other graveyards. Dormant guardians who had been sleeping and dreaming just like the Ethon Valis had once slept, and in their ancient systems. A new search protocol activated, scanning the stars for more humans with clever hands and stubborn hearts. The Guardian fleet was waking up. The Hollow's long feast was finally over, and humanity, the species that every great civilization had dismissed as primitive and worthless, had just become the most important people in the galaxy. Marcus Ethon looked out at the stars, at the tiny human colonies and the frightened alien worlds and everything he had inherited. "Do not worry," he said softly, to himself and to the ship and to everyone listening. "I have fixed worse." And somewhere in the void between galaxies, the Hollow heard him and trembled.